told him the other night he would come.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm walking through
No way.
45, would be a lot for us. Yeah.
And we did one.
Mhm.
And they all end up in the city.
But it gives you a whole different outlook on life to grow up that way.
Yeah.
And you learn such, I don't know. I mean, it kind of amazes me, some of the things people who grew up in the city don't know. I'm like, really? I can't remember any examples, but just every so often it surprises me.
Driving a track,
That's okay.
backing up,
I can let you drive a lawn tractor.
backing up.
Where'd you grow up?
North of Barrett. Actually, I was born in Reedsburg and then Waukesha, and farm Waukesha for a while, then north of Barrett. That's where we ended up.
Hey,
Howdy,
David shows up.
I did.
Didn't you?
Good place too, nice of you.
Say you got the right seat.
Hey, Tom.
How's it going, Dave? All right. Houston, we have a problem.
And listening to Ken Burns, Belgium shows up more than he did in my history books ever.
Yeah. That's one of the things. First World War, largely fought in Belgium. Second World War, May 10th.
It went pretty good. We had a wonderful summer for the garden. Everything grew, it just rained that we needed it. Yeah.
My tomatoes turned into a jungle. It's like going on safari to try to find the right ones. I can't click them back and click them back. It's just,
And make them grow some more. My cucumbers were my best thing. I quit canning. I had 60 quarts of dill pickles, and that was about mid-season.
wow.
Gave a lot away.
I was gonna say, you wanna bring some in there, we'd be glad to help you
Now
sample.
we sampled the dill pickles, all right?
Rain came just the right time for corn too.
I don't plant corn, my garden is pretty small, but I have to select what it is. And since we can dill pickles, that's one of the things that's important. Summer squash always get away on me.
How's it going? Thanks for coming. Battling the parking gods. Swimming upstream. I feel like it's 10. Yeah, I feel like a sandwich. Hey, how late is Lane's open? Do they close at 2 o'clock still?
Lane's Bakery?
Yeah.
I don't think they close at 2, do they?
We're close to early now. I went up after an event here to get a donut, a health food donut. And they've already closed.
What a word.
I suppose that.
They open it. Good.
You just got, you're just ready for that donut and then it's like,
Got your whole pancreas ginned up.
You would see.
When you mentioned the numbers in 4-H, how does that compare over the centuries, over the decades? Down, well, there aren't that many kids on the farm. But My kids weren't considered farm kids either, but they all joined 4-H.
Yep, it's open to everybody. Part of the challenges, expanding the brand.
Well, you can take a lot of stuff from the animals to bear.
Yeah.
The cooking.
Here.
Well,
Take it, please.
sewing and.
You could pick out 3 nice, beautiful tomatoes.
Yeah,
Wine making and pot throwing.
that's good. Especially if you're in Illinois, man, legal.
Especially if you're 12.
Drama and acting became big in our 4-H.
Yeah, it's a
Drama and acting.
There was a period where all of Extension had a really big performing arts. Component to it, creative writing. Just the life of the farm community.
Creative excuse making is also a big part of farming too. It's either like too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold. And then when everything's perfect, prices are too low.
You know, we're reporting it.
That and bowlers are good excuses too.
Unbelievable, be nice to the farmer.
Talented excuse makers, that's all.
I tell you. Well, that might be good. Yeah. Working for farmers in Illinois where, you know, you work really hard in March, April, and May, and then you go,
So not,
maybe you go out and
so
field
not
prep.
dairy.
Yeah, or anything that has animals, especially dairy, because we haven't figured out how to teach the cows that it's Sunday.
Well, it's 1 o'clock.
No, it's only 12:59.
Oh.
Look at that. Ticky-tacky.
I'm Paul Randall, if you don't know who I am, coordinator for the PLATO. And Tom's in up front, the other coordinator. And usually on the first day, I try to have people tell who they are and introduce themselves a little bit. So I'll just introduce myself, few words. I'm a former high school biology teacher. Did a little administration at the end to build the salary up. And before that, I was a farm boy up in Manitowoc County. Graduated from Valdez High School. Was in 4-H, was in FFA. And when I was at Madison going to the university, we had the option of attending grad school reports. The grad students on Wednesday nights would come to Bulge Hall and they'd report with their advisor on their research project. And 50 years later, when I came back, I tried to find that again. Of course, it isn't here. The closest thing we got is Tom Zinnan, who is doing research for the whole university. And so that's how we tagged into this class, Frontiers of Life Science. And we are now in our 17th year, finishing our 17 years of Frontiers. So with that, I'm Paul Randall, and I'll let Dave introduce himself.
Mine won't be as long. I'm Dave Lukey, College of Agriculture graduate, worked for Oscar Mayer for 38 years. Also got a part-time farm, so I gotta make excuses why the farm looks so good this year. And I've been in the science class really since it started. But
I'm Sue Joseph, retired from DNR as a civil engineer with them for 37 years. I've come off and on over the years, so yeah, come for a semester and then be gone for a couple of years and come back. So I'm back this semester.
Thank you.
Welcome anytime.
Thank you.
It's gonna be a good semester.
I'm just curious.
Welcome.
Fred Will, I'm a physician. I'm not really retired. I'm not sure where I am. And as I'm sitting here with my phone, I'm actually applying for another job. And I've been doing local tenants. I just got back from spending 3 months in Southern Virginia on their thought board. And I'm very interested in this.
Good, welcome.
I'm Kathy Ott. it's not much to know about me. I do enjoy this class though.
Thank you.
I'm Lanny Evie, retired teacher from Lake Mills, and I live in Madison, and I've been coming here for a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jim Newton. I live in Middleton now. I spent 25 years working in IT at the Department of Transportation. So I'm connected to life sciences. I used to cakenize chickens many years ago. And I just enjoy all the like postdocs and whatever come just to tell what they're working on. This is just incredible to see where biology and botany are going these days.
My name is Ken Popp. I retired from Alliant Energy. I kind of managed coal deliveries, probably not too popular in this day and age, but went to school at Purdue for a few years. Grew up on a chicken farm in Indiana. So I apologize. I'll probably stand most of the time. I have some back issues. So.
As long as you don't stand up there.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm Barbara Hill. I'm retired from the university. I was a researcher in the School of Medicine and Public Health, and I'm a lifelong learner, so I sign up for lots of things where I'm gonna learn some more.
And you're welcome.
Thanks.
I'm Sue Kernas, retired medical technologist. I've been coming here since I retired 8 years ago or something, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, hello.
Could you just introduce yourself as to?
Oh, I'm Michelle, and my husband Barrett is coming. I walk.
You found a place to park.
I walk, see. He's trying to find a place to park. We're retired, we live in Madison, and we enjoy your program.
Is this the right guy?
There he is, yes. I have my mask. Do we wear masks, or it's our choice, huh?
Choice.
Okay. Good.
And I think she introduced you, but you might introduce yourself.
I'm Bill Obama, her husband.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much and welcome. Bring any friends that you can as future classes.
Okay. Good.
And let's see how many people we got at home. Yep. I went the wrong direction.
If you did not sign in, if you didn't register and you didn't sign in, there's a sheet back here. I know you have to sign in, but,
Okay, at home we have Jordan Kaniski, Ann Schrader, Sandy Rotter, and Tom Kinski.
Email address is on that too.
yeah, if I don't have them, if I have them. I have them for years, anyone that's been here before, I have them, but. If you don't have them, put them on there, or I'll get them off of by email.
So I'm Tom Zinnon, as Paul alluded to. I help organize the Wednesday night at the lab public science series offered every Wednesday night, 50 times a year. Tonight, we have the speaker, Michael Menon, who's at the Forest and Wildlife Ecology Department, and who also works for the Bureau of Aeronautics at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. And he's going to talk about his work at the intersection of wildlife and aviation. Next week, Lindsay Snyder from the School of Veterinary Medicine is going to be talking about what's the point, acupuncture in animals. So if you've got any pets, if you're interested in acupuncture and how it might work with animals, that'd be great. I've put it on my coleus, and the coleus don't feel a thing. Because I'm a plant pathologist. In 2 weeks, what's that?
Did they turn red?
Some of them do. And in 2 weeks, Joanna Osterwijk will be here to talk about, or will be at Wednesday night at the lab to talk about vertical gardening. So that'll be fun. Long ago, I did some research on hydroponics, which was horizontal hydroponics, but to see all this vertical stuff is pretty cool.
You have next week for here?
We do, and I'm trying to remember who it's gonna be. Does anybody remember in the email that I sent out?
I don't remember getting it.
You did get an email?
I got
Not
an email
this
to announce this class, but that's the only one.
Didn't I have two more speakers on that one?
No,
Yeah.
anybody else?
Okay, well, I'll look it up. But I don't want to say this because I'm getting,
Well, put it out over the end on.
yeah.
I think it was someone on oxygen and alien life, wasn't it?
Say again, please.
This is Jordan Kaniski. I thought the second one was on oxygen and microbes and alien life.
You're exactly right, Jaime Cordova.
Yep.
He's a solar system ambassador with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he works on astrobiology. Thank you very much, Jordan. And who is the third person?
I don't know the third person.
Okay, thank you. So I organized 3 different series.
We're trying to figure out what's going on.
On
I know.
October 5th is shade grown coffee.
Oh, yeah, Janine Richards. We got it made and shaved. So she's
I didn't get down that far before.
she does really good. Don't say it in front of the writer. So she does a lot of cool field botany, and this is also agroecology botany. And so if you're interested in coffee, epiphytes, growing crops in the shade, low impact agriculture, that would be a good one to show up for. All right. That I'm going to come around here and start. So thanks again for coming to PLATO Frontiers in Life Sciences. I'm Tom Zinnan. I work at the Biotechnology Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I also work for the Division of Extension, Wisconsin 4-H. And today I get to talk with you about this recovery mission, the UW Missing in Action Recovery and Identification Program. Ran a recovery mission in Belgium this summer, and I got to participate in that. So I'm going to tell you some stories about that. You can ask questions as we go if you'd like. I'll try to field them as best I can. First of all, do you have any questions to begin with?
Were you there for the whole recovery?
Was I there for the whole recovery? Yes. So it started on Monday, June 27th and ran through Friday, July 15th. So I did another one back in the summer of 2016, and I was only there for the second half of that one. That one was in the north of France.
What are we recovering?
What are we recovering? Thank you. So the UW Missing in Action program is designed to find, recover, and identify remains of missing, MIA, missing in action, U.S. service people, primarily from World War II, often pilots, but not always. Good. All right, so here we go. So this is the program. It started in 2014. It even has some antecedents going back to 2012 that I'll talk about. And this is a program at the Biotech Center. It's started by my boss, Chuck Konzinski. For some context, this is a map from a couple of weeks ago from the Department of Defense. And this shows there are 81,500 Americans remain missing since World War II. This does not include World War I, the Spanish-American War, or other wars. Of that 82,000, half of them, 41,000 are missing, of the missing are presumed lost at sea. So we're going to do 82,000, but 41,000 of those are lost at sea. So we got perhaps 41,000 available on land. And then you can see what the distribution is. And there's far more in the Pacific Theater where my dad served in the Philippines starting in April of 1945 through April of 46 than there are in Europe. But this gives you an idea of what the numbers are that we're looking at. And this is just a closer up view of that so that you can see that a little bit better.
How do we have missing in action in America?
I don't know. I'm assuming might be training. It might be.
It shouldn't be missing though.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a very good question. I'll have to ask.
Well, but this is since World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know how many of these are at Pearl Harbor and considered in, for example, the USS Arizona.
Yeah.
So this is a tweet from the UW Missing in Action and Recovery and Identification Program, which you can follow that if you're a Twitter person. This is from November 11th of 2021, last year. And that was Armistice Day for many, many years. And then it became Veterans Day. And so they're recalling that. And the big thing is for here of those 82,000 who are missing, 1,500 are from Wisconsin. How big is 82,000? Well, that would fill Camp Randall. And so it gives you a context of that it's a lot of people. We've done several Wednesday night at the lab presentations on the work of the Missing in Action program. The first one was finding Private Gordon. And that's an interesting story because Judd Henry is the person who brought the case to Chuck Kaczynski back in 2012. In this case, Judd was pursuing a case where the remains were known, but Judd thought they were misidentified. And what had happened is there was a Canadian citizen named Lawrence Gordon who had joined the American Army and who had been killed in France in August of 1944. And after the battle, his remains were misidentified as being German remains and were put in a German ossuary. And Chuck and Jed and our colleague Josh Hyman had to do all this work to collaborate with the French government, the German government, the Canadian government, the US government, to get the permission to persuade them that here's the evidence that we think this box of bones is going to be misidentified and could be the remains of Lawrence Gordon. Let us pull that box of bones out of the wall in the ossuary, open it up, take a sample, run the DNA identification, which they did, and successfully identified the remains as actually being of Lawrence Gordon. What's the objection? I think people are very careful about any disturbance of a war grave. So it's got to be pretty persuasive to be able to do that. And of course, this is 10 years ago. I don't know how what the approach is now.
I don't know the term ossuary.
Yeah, ossuary, OSSUARY. I'd never heard of it either. And it's a place where rather than burying in bodies, when you have only bones, you place them in a box, and you put the box into, in this case, you put it into a wall. So it looks more like a mausoleum, but it's without complete bodies. It's merely the bones. And I may be wrong on that. That's just
Process with that. So it wasn't like they were saved in a museum or a storage area. They were.
correct. Yes, that's my understanding. Yep. So this allowed the remains to be repatriated. So they had a formal transfer of the remains from Germany to the United States because of the Army. He was in the United States Army. They brought the remains back with honors first to Madison, and then they transferred the remains to Canadian government, who took the remains back home to Saskatchewan, and that's where Lawrence Gordon's remains were buried in the mid-20s, in about 7 or 8 years ago. Josh gave a talk at Wednesday night at the lab on how you do this forensic DNA, which includes the kinds of things that help speed the identification of the remains. The Then the second case after Lawrence Gordon was finding Lieutenant Fazekas. Frank Fazekas was a 22-year-old lieutenant in the U.S. Army Air Forces. He flew P-47 Pursuits, which is why it's called a P. We call it a fighter now. It's a single seat aircraft, which is important because that means wherever the crash went down, you expect to find only one set of remains unless someone was killed on the ground by the crash. Chuck pursued this with his team. They were able to get permission of the landowner in the town in the north of France. We excavated that in 2016 and again in 2017. We're able to find remains. We're able to identify them through DNA evidence, and then again return the remains, in this case, to Arlington National Cemetery for burial in 2019. This is an interesting picture because this is showing Ryan Rubin, who is a physician. He's an ER physician. He's an ER flight physician in the sense that he goes on the med flights and he runs that program at the UW hospitals. He has an undergraduate degree in archaeology and he's pretty savvy about airplanes. So he's quite a combination to have. What we're showing here is two machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns from 2016. There are 8 such machine guns on a P-47, and they're really important because they survive crashes. They're not made out of aluminum, they're made out of ferrous material, steel and iron, and they have little tags on them with serial numbers. Each gun has a separate serial number, and there are records of which machine guns were on which planes. And so this was important. This allowed us to confirm that the plane that went down that in this field near Bousquier, France, was in fact the one that we were looking for.
You get a serial number off of that?
Yes. And that was a pretty cool thing. We actually took these two into a garage owned by the 12-year-old boy who was then an 82-year-old man who witnessed the crash go down, witnessed the plane go down. And to be in the garage of a now 82-year-old man who had watched the plane go down all those years ago and sit there and scrape away and brush away and then do one of those things where you put the piece of paper on over a plate and then rub it real gently with pencil and start to be able to make it out. That was a very happy moment for that entire dig. So that's why we're always happy when we find something that has has serial numbers in it. So this is Ryan a couple of years ago showing Frank Fazekas's name with that rosette next to it. And that rosette's important because this is actually a list of missing in action American service people at the Arden Military Cemetery, American Cemetery. And he was originally among the missing in action, but because his remains were found and identified and then buried in a known grave site, in this case at Arlington National Cemetery, they put a rosette there to indicate that happy news. Those rosettes are big because that's what the people on the team are trying to get to. The two big things are to be able to identify and to share that news with the family. So this is Frank Fazekas's tombstone at Arlington National Cemetery. He was 20.
Today, did he know exactly where the plane was and had he scouted the area and taken things away from it previously?
So that was his home right across the street, and he continued to live there his entire life and raise his family there. And he was pretty sure that he knew where the plane went in, except in the 70s, they put a TGV line through, and that shifted some roads that he had used as markers. And so he thought that it was going to be north of this road, this little access road. And when Chuck and his colleagues went in 2015 to scout it, they didn't find it. And there was this amazing thing where what happened. So Chuck was able to get Google Earth pictures, and then British intelligence pictures where they flew over taking pictures of the countryside whenever there was a plane that went down. When they matched the two pictures, the road had been moved during the construction of the TGV line. So his memory was accurate that it was originally shot down north of the road, but the road had been moved north, had not disturbed the crash site, luckily, but it was actually south of there. So that was a big deal, and it was a very interesting story that if you go back and look at the
So the crash site had been farmed.
yes. So when the P-47 went down, and this is in contrast to what I'm going to talk with you about the Belgian, the soils are very deep, no stones, lots of clay, just goes in. It probably went 20 feet into the ground, which means a very big crater. And so my understanding is that soon after that, after the Germans came, because remember this was May of 44, and that part of France was under the control of the German military. The German military came first, documented what they could, and then the local farmers filled it back in and farmed. And you gotta remember, these are folks that have seen a lot of warfare since 1914 in this ground. So it's not too unusual for people to fill in a lot more than just one plain hole and resume farming it. So that was the first two cases. Here's the third case. Lieutenant Walter Stone, who was also a P-47 pilot. This is showing Greg Jameson, who's an assistant professor of anthropology at UW-Milwaukee at the Waukesha campus, and he has become the lead professional architect for the project. They were able to find remains and identify remains of Walter Stone also, so that was the third successful program. What you see here is going to be very different than the cornfield or the sugar beet field that the Fazekas dig was in. This is in forest, but you're also seeing soils that you could dig easily into and fairly deep. And this guy right here, which is an excavator. So this is showing the Ryan again at the cemetery, showing the rosette for Walter Stone. Then in 2019 came the fourth project. And since this one is still underway, I can't tell you specific things about this because that's part of the rules of collaborating with the Department of Defense and the folks that do this work. So if there's a successful identification in 8, 10, 14, 16 months, then I can tell you more about that. I will say that the person that we're looking for was in a bomber, not a single seat fighter. And that this plane went down sometime in the latter half of 1944 near Bastogne, Belgium. And so keep in mind, the Americans were and British were flying back and forth over there throughout the war. So it's not just the Battle of the Bulge. It's May of 1940, and then coming back through in September of 1944, the German counterattack starting on December 16th of 1944, the Allied counterattack against the German counterattack, which went until the middle of January of 45. No. Yeah. So there's people like me who aren't archaeologists. Archaeologist means the study of old things. I am merely old, but I don't study. I'm not an archaeologist. So we'll go through all the people that were on the team this year. This is the team from 2019. So they did a significant dig then, and they were hoping to go back in 2020, but COVID. They were hoping to go back in 2021, but COVID. And here's March 22 of this year, and they're like, hey, this is great. We think we're going to get to go back. And in fact, we did get to go back. And this is happy news. This is the Walter Stone dig, if I have it right, because it doesn't look like the dig that I participated in Belgium. So part of this is I went over to France on a family vacation on the 14th and 15th of June, and short story shorter, I got to take my family and on the drive from Paris, France, up to Belgium to rendezvous with this team that was going to fly in on Monday, June 27th. I got to drive by Bousquier, France, and show my family where I had spent 2.5 weeks in 2016. And the really lucky thing is, this is Monsieur Couche. This is the son of these, who at the time was the 12-year-old boy, and he lives at the site. So he's got his house, his dad lives next door, and this is the field that we excavated. It looks like it's in some sort of wheat. In 1944, it was in Beterave, sugar beets. In 2016, it was in corn. And it looks like this year it's in wheat. This is my daughter, Claire, my son, Will, my wife, Kristen. And right there is the line, the TGV line that was constructed that caused the farm access roads to be shifted, which made that puzzlement of why is this not where the elder Monsieur Couche thought it was going to be. If you drive down the road a mile, and we did this, I wanted to show my kids this. Here's the monument in Bousquier to, this says the community of Bousquier to its children killed for France, 1914, 1918. It lists them. There are 4 sides to this. There are names on all 4 sides. And then here's the war from 1939 to 1945. And then there was this. And so this was a very big deal. The folks in this community were very kind and very supportive of this work to try to find a soldier missing in action. And they put this up in 2018, not for a person from France or their own community, but for an American soldier. If you read French, great. If you don't, I'll try to do it. To Frank Fazekas, First Lieutenant, U.S. Army Air Corps pilot, the P-47D, shot down by the German Army on the 27th of May at Bousquier, in the area called Le Pont de Jour. This memory placed in 8th of May of 2018. If your French is better than mine, please correct me. That's what I think it means. So Bousquier was on the way to Belgium, but so was Dunkirk. So we got to stop and see Dunkirk. This was the 26th of June, very long days that far north. And my children had both seen the movie Dunkirk when they showed it up at the EAA fly-in in 2018, I think. And so to be able to show them this was a big deal for me personally. That says to the glorious memory of the pilots, sailors, and soldiers of the armies of France and their allies who sacrificed during the Battle of Dunkirk, May and June of 1940. So my family dropped me off on Monday, June 27th at the Brussels Zaventem Airport. We gathered the team and then we went on to Bastogne. So here's a little bit more background. I've mentioned some of this already. Keep in mind, Belgium was invaded in 1940 by Germany on May 10th. It was under control of German forces all that time from May 40 until September 44, when it was liberated by Canadians on the left, the British in the center, and the US on the right, advancing northeast. Then on December 16th, came the German counterattack that the Europeans called the Battle of the Ardennes, and that all Americans called the Battle of the Bulge. And that went on for a month, from the middle of December to the middle of January. And then keep in mind that there was bombing by of German forces and facilities by US and British Air Forces throughout that time. So the plane that we're looking for was a bomber, but it could have gone down in any time in the latter half of the 1944. So what we're looking for remains or other physical evidence of a missing in action crew member. The site was held by the enemy at the time of the shoot down. That meant they were the first people there. They recovered remains of some of the crew. The Germans got some of the machine guns, which are important to us because of the identification. So of the crew members, one was unaccounted for, and that was the one that we were looking for. And we think that crew member went down with the plane, and anticipate that any remains would be found at the crash site. There's always a possibility that the person bailed out right beforehand. As with Buskier and Lieutenant Fazekas, this one also had a 12-year-old boy, this time a Belgian, who also lived not far away. And so it's amazing to have these personal connections with people who were very young, now very old, and can tell you what it was like on that day to watch it go down. This is the picture of the team this year. And I'll go through each one of these folks so that you get an idea of the range of the team. And that's a big deal because this is an academic team. It's a partnership with the Department of Defense. It's designed and built to advance the academic field of this kind of research and service. So this is my boss, Chuck Konzinski. He's the one that started the program. And this is back from 2014, but he's been working on this since 2012 and started the program officially in 2014. He's the associate director at the Biotech Center. He's interested in this kind of work. He sees it as something that's a good way it's a good thing to do fundamentally, and it's good service that the DNA technology at the Biotech Center can be put to work.
Was he ever in the military or is he still?
No, but as many of his family have been. So I would say he comes from a military family. But he's not a veteran. So there's some people on the team that were veterans, some people like me that were not. This is Greg Jameson. This is the second picture of Greg you've seen. This is the site, and it's a very gorgeous place. And one thing I will comment on is because of all the movies that I've seen and especially the newsreels at the time, I think of the Battle of the Bulge happening in black and white. And I think of the war in September being primarily in black and white. And it is just as colorful as any place in the Driftless here in Wisconsin. It is gorgeous. This is a shaker table. We'll talk more about that. That is a bucket. We'll talk more about that. Those are the complex devices that I operated. And boy, can I give you details. This is Brett Hoffman. He's another archaeologist with the project. He was works for the third UW system campus at UW Oshkosh. And he's also collaborating this year. Shaheen Christie is an assistant archaeologist with the program. She's worked with Greg Jameson. She's finishing up her PhD on late Roman Britain mortuary practices. Now, this is kind of interesting because if we were to find something while we're digging, the assumption is, oh, it's going to be on the site that, from something 80 years ago. However, the Romans were running around Belgium a lot. And there's a town called Arlon, Arlon, not far from here, and which was a Roman city. And there's a very famous museum that we got to go to. So we never know when we're going to run into something that might be 80 years old or 800 years old or 2000 years old. She's an expert on bones. So if we found any osseous material, any bones or anything that we thought would be bones, anything we would think and hope might be human bones, we would take it first to her. She was also the forensic photographer for the project. This is Ella Axelrod. I got to work with her in 2016. She was at Colorado College and is now at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, working with another professor by the name of Bill Belcher, who I got to work with in 2016. And she's at this table where you bring stuff that you find and she examines it. So she's going to be assessing any objects that you find, especially things that aren't bone, because Shaheen gets the bones first, but Ella gets all the other physical evidence. You've seen this picture before. This is Ryan Rubin and another person from 2016. I've already described Ryan's key roles in the team. He's also the team physician, so it's pretty nice, especially during a pandemic, to have a physician on hand. And so if there's any injuries or illnesses, Ryan would be the first person to take care of them. So the other thing is, we always have to have the head archaeologist on site. And the head archaeologist was Greg Jameson. So it was kind of dicey, because if Greg got COVID, what would happen? It wouldn't just be him having to stay back at the hotel. The whole team would be prevented from that. So this summer was a very interesting time to be doing this kind of work, because you had to worry about making sure pretty much nobody got it, but especially your head archaeologist. This is Finn Kennison, and she's also at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln doing anthropologists, and she and Ella often collaborated at the exam table. This is Tori Tiedeman. I got to work with him when he was at UW-Madison. He was on the student member of the UW Board of Regents. He was in the Marine Corps, and so I think he's our first veteran. And he's been working now, this was the third dig that he's been on, and it's good to have young people who are strong and who like to operate a shovel, because that would no longer be me. Tristan Krause is another UW-Madison alum. He's getting his PhD now at Texas Tech in history, but he's also done a lot of field experience, both with our program and with this other thing called the Cranfield Forensic Institute. And so that's our second veteran, and he likes to dig. This is Théo Gier. He's a student from the neighborhood. He goes to school at the University of Namur, and he was one of our 2 translators. And if you've ever been to Belgium or Luxembourg, you know the Belgians and the Luxembourgese are very good at multiple languages. So French, English, Walloon, Luxembourgese, which is even different, Dutch, all these amazing things, often German. So Théo was important for 3 big reasons. He knew the lay of the land and the community. He knows multiple languages, and he's an archaeology student. Same thing with Elisa here, Mathieu. She's an undergrad at the University of Namur, speaks multiple languages, grew up in the area. Same 3 reasons that it's great to have Théo. This is Matt Campanin, and he was a veteran and served for many years in the 101st Airborne in places that I only watched on TV, like Afghanistan and Iraq. And he's in Green Bay. He's also the state adjutant, which I learned is basically the state head person. for the disabled American veterans in the Department of Wisconsin. And there's very few things that Matt can't do. This is David Green. He's also a veteran, started off as enlisted, became a commissioned officer, retired as a major from the Army, and he's the adjutant for the VFW in Wisconsin. This is Carrie Mclaren. She rose to being a command sergeant major after a long career in the U.S. Army, and she now lives and works in Madison. So another veteran. Aaron Taylor is really cool to me because he's illustrates how important this project is for its academic stuff, because he's works at a St. Mary's University in Halifax in Nova Scotia, and he would like to do a similar program looking for Canadian missing in action. And of course, there are a lot of Canadians from World War I. Unlike the United States, Canada was in World War I from 1914 through 1918, and they have 27,000 Canadians missing from the two world wars. This is Mike Mclaren, another veteran, and also Chuck's brother-in-law. He was in the Army for a long time, 29 years, and now works as a civilian contractor. And he comes up and donates his time 3 weeks to be in the dig. This is Tim Zadalis. He's a retired 2-star general. I don't think I'd ever met a 2-star general before. And it's a good thing to be around people that have flown lots and lots of planes and have commanded lots and lots of pilots of different lots of planes. So he was knowledgeable about the history, very current on U.S. Air Force and what these kinds of what this kind of history means to the current mindset in the Air Force. And then there's me. So that's my 4-H hat and my science expedition shirt. And this is what the dig looked like late in the dig. So now I'm going to go quickly through the saga. This is the dessert on the night of June 27th at the place we stayed at. We stayed at a family-operated auberge hotel in the countryside. And that is not as good as it looks. It actually is much better than it even looks. This is the table that we all sat at for breakfast and for dinner. The camaraderie was a big deal for a team of 16, 17, 18 people. And having breakfast in the morning, dinner at night. We even came back here on occasion for lunch. Day 2, Tuesday, June 28th, I believe. This is our first briefing day in the field, and I'm going to go to this picture, a bigger version. I want to point out that when we arrived at the countryside hotel, they were flying the U.S. flag and the POW MIA flag. And those are the kinds of things that give you a feeling for the appreciation that the current folks there still have for people that for the folks 80 years ago who came and fought to liberate them. So here's Eliza, Chuck, Dave. This is me taking notes. Eliza, Finn, Mike, Tristan, Carrie, and we're all listening to Greg give the briefing. And then this is on our way out to the field the first time. We had 2 vans plus a car. So we all piled into one of those 3 vehicles and drove 8, 10, 12 miles to the site through this very gorgeous countryside. But the most important thing is we got to stop at the Smatch, which is this wonderful kind of supermarket where you could go in and buy Belgian chocolates, candy, soda, other health foods. And this was a big deal because this is part of the maintaining morale, so that you could buy whatever you wanted to. We stopped at Smatch every 3rd day or so, because you're going to be working in the field about 8 hours, from about 8 o'clock till about 5 o'clock, plus an hour off for lunch. That's a total of 9 hours. And it's a very good thing to be able to have the stuff that you want to drink and have for snack, in addition to the stuff that they supply for us. It's also a great place to get to practice your French if you're a person like me. Bonjour la classe.
Everybody's wearing long sleeves. What's the temperature like? Everybody was wearing long sleeves.
That's because we're at a work site. It was gorgeous. It was in the 70s almost every day, maybe low 80s. And it poured on Monday, June 27th on the drive from from Brussels to the area near Bastogne. And we had maybe 3 raindrops over 3 weeks. It's not good for the farmers because it was too much, but it was perfect weather from our point of view. This shows the driving into the site. This is what I think is a wheat field. If only I had a PhD in plant pathology, could identify small grains reliably. One of the 2 of those things is true. And this is one of the differences, again, with this site compared to France in 2016. We were working in an agricultural field with really deep soil. And here in 2022 in Belgium, we're working in a combined part of the areas forest, a planted forest with these spruce trees, and then an open field. And this field fell away. It was up on a flat area, and then it fell into a ravine. And this is what greeted us again. The folks knew we were coming, and they took some of the cones and laid out the word welcome. And again, these are things that remind you that they appreciate not only what we're doing, but what folks before us. This is what the field looked like as we arrived. This is all grown up in these kinds of plants. This field was all fully excavated in 2019. So in 2020, 2021, it was the plants grew back this way. We had to find the stake that was left in the ground as the point of beginning. To do that, we went to this thing called a bicon. This is out at the road where the little access trail meets the busy highway or the farm road. And the Department of Defense folks that we are partnering with dropped this thing off. It's called a bicon, and it's full of all this cool equipment that I'll go through, including lumber, shovels, spades, axes, hatchets, all this good stuff that you need for doing an excavation. One of the next things we had to do on the first couple of days is build the table. So we took these, I can't say they're 2x4s because it's French, Belgian dimensional lumber, but it looks like 2x4 to me, so we'll call it that. And this is a shaker table built to fit these shakers. We didn't build these shakers, these screens, but Matt and others built the table. The bicon also contains these, what I'll call 4x4s with the pipe in them and the union. And this is the kind of thing that I could put together with my incredible skills, these hands. And then you hang 4 of these shaker tables on them, or screen tables on this, and you'll see more of that. And this is what it looks like with the engineering tape. This is David working with Chuck. And this is something that I never saw in France. This is more rocks than I saw in 2 weeks in France. This is just one bucket in the site in Belgium. So it's geology, geography, soils, very different. This is a picture from the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA. So when I've been saying Department of Defense, these are the folks within the Department of Defense that Chuck's outfit collaborates with. I've never seen this glorious thing, but my goodness, that looks nice. You take it and you put a bucket full of whatever you're digging and put it on there. What a wonderful picture. Just wish it worked that way. So now on the first and second days, we have to figure out which trees that Matt and crew are going to cut down with the chainsaw. got to get reoriented. Here's Finn and Ella using a handheld GPS to find the metal stake that was the point of beginning left from 2019. Here's using the tape measure to measure out the spread, measuring out the quadrants that we might be digging in.
Who put that pipe in the first place?
We did, the team did,
A couple years ago?
yeah. So that's what you do, is to make,
But where you put that's pretty critical.
yes, and you want to make sure that one's made out of iron so that you can find it. You got a pretty good idea from GPS where it is, but you don't want to use an aluminum unless you've got a metal detector that detects aluminum.
Buckets or swings, a different sieve.
No, they're all the same size as far as in my experience. That's you can do sequential stacked sieves. I've never seen it done in archaeology. I've seen it done in soil science when you're looking for nematodes. And you know, a big sieve, a medium sieve, a small sieve, and then the hockey goalie sieve, really tiny, nothing ever gets through. Because, you know, my son's a goalie. Okay, so but I've never seen that done here. This is a made to order specialty sieve setup. And this again is part of why a university might want to do this, because they're trying to pioneer new ways of doing things. And so you can see it's made out of metal. It's got fancier shaker tables, the same gauge of sieve though. And we brought this with us, and this assembles, it fits into a car. It was great to have there and to compare and contrast to the metal ones. These are the kind of tools that I would be using, because it's just the caliber that I am. This is a loppers, pickaxe, really great Fisker's shovel with a handle, another shovel. These are the European types of shovels that are a little flatter. You know what I'm used to. The buckets, we probably had 45 or 50 buckets to keep everything going. A tape measure.
You guys have any concerns about digging into unexploded ordnance? Probably more World War I there than II.
I know at least one person on the team did. And that would be me. It's cowardice. Yeah, and we had specific training on that. UXO, unexploded ordnance, what we would do, and I'll show you a picture about that. So that's another thing that was a little bit different. This was a bomber, not a fighter. Although I think P-47s might be able to carry bombs. We didn't have any concerns in 2016 about a bomb, but since this was a bomber that went down, I was like, I thought they would have found it in 2019 if there was, because it's so easy to find an intact bomb with a metal detector, but still you have to worry about it. And then I was also worried about what happens if the Germans came and put mines around it, or if the Americans came and put mines around it and didn't mind the mines. And so these are things that people like I would think of, because I didn't want to step on something, hear a click. And then here's the classic trowel and dustbin. Another thing that's really important is shade and rain protection, so that you've got a place to do the office work, a place to have lunch and snacks. We had a break every hour, right at 10 minutes to the hour. And that's a big deal, because when you're shaking those things, and a guy like me, that's all I did was pick up a bucket, put it on there and shake, and put on your gloves and look for it. And you're looking for little shards of bone or little pieces of metal. And if you don't have a break, it's not just the physical fatigue, it's the mental fatigue. So the things that Chuck and his crew had to think about, and how do you keep people motivated, happy, good morale, well fed. This is a canopy, but it's also speaks to that you got to think about how you're going to make things pleasant. And this is a picture of one of our breaks. And again, It's great to have shade. Didn't have so much shade in France when we were working in the corn. You can see we had food, trash bag, water, but reliable breaks that I could look at my watch and know I got 12 minutes to go. That was helpful. And then this one I really like because we're in Belgium, and you know, the English call the bathroom the loo, for short for Waterloo, and Waterloo is in Belgium. And here's a French word called louez-moi, and I'm guessing this is a play on words between French and British, French, and or Belgian French and British English, because louez-moi means rent me. And it's really good to have two of them, especially when you have 16, 17, 18 people on site. And when you get in there, and this is what you see, we'll fit a home away from home. And the Vikings still can't win. So here's what we're looking at it. Our second day in the field, we're going to have one of these big excavators, well, semi-big. And that's a big deal because this is not like, you're not like digging up Herculaneum, spade by little trowel by trowel. We had a lot of dirt to get through. And so we had 3 days scheduled for an excavator, 3 to excavate, 1 to backfill and close the site. So there was a backfill crawler. This is the driver's car. This is what it looked like. And this is how big it was. That would be a lot of digging, even though we had 8, 10, 12 people that could drive a spade. This is so much faster than doing that. So here we are arriving on the second day. This is the car. This is one of the 2 of the vans. So when the big excavator comes, so come out the big blue tarps, because when they dig up, where do they put it? Anything that they dig up, we screen. So it all goes on a big blue tarp. What are we going to dig up? The archaeologists lay out these grids. They're 1 meter by 1 meter, or 2 meter by 2 meters, or 1 meter by 2 meters. It's down to, they decide how deep we go, and we didn't go very deep here, 1.5 feet, 2 feet. In contrast to France, where they went down 10, 12, 14 feet, and you had to have a way to get into and out of the hole. So here you can see one of these rectangles of this, looks like a 1 by 2 meter to me. He's got his vest on so that the driver can more easily see him. This is chatting with another person who stopped by from the Belgian government. Here we are going in with, I think this is Teo working with the metal detector. There were 2 metal detectors. Teo brought his. This is Eliza taking notes. This is Shaheen with her forensic camera, her fancier camera. And you can see the excavator digs up what we ask him to dig up, puts it in a pile. There are separate piles for separate places. They each have a coordinate given to them, and we have to keep track of which ones, where we get the stuff from. So what if anything you see here means we have to shovel it into a bucket, send it through a screen. How much did we do? 360 cubic meters. Yeah.
Is there an equivalent to Digger's Hotline? Or does someone go ahead and investigate all that stuff before you arrive?
I think that's part of the site preparation to make sure there aren't any gas lines and stuff. But this is a 1/4 mile off the main road. There's no houses around. So I was more worried about the unexploded ordnance than a gas line. Doesn't mean you can't have a gas line going through the countryside though. So now we're getting a little deeper, and they're trying to look at the soil horizon and decide how deep to go. And you can see this is a shale situation, very different than the clay that I was used to in 2016. Because of all the tree cutting down, you got to maintain your chainsaw. So that's Matt and Tristan doing that. Here's Ryan and Matt doing the shoveling. into the buckets. And then somebody would carry the buckets to the shaker tables. And then a person like me would pick up the bucket and put it on the shaker and shake. And then you hopefully, say again? They're this size. Because it's metric, it's a little shy of 5 based on my eyeballs. But yeah, plenty heavy so that you don't fill them all the way to the top. And this shows us doing full bore. Look at and what I get out of this is the amount of preparation and planning it takes to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus another 5 or 6 people into the field, equipped, sufficiently trained, good enough morale that we're all working together day after day after day. It's taken one day off, Sunday, another 5, 6 days, day off, to look for this. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. And if you're lucky, this is the kind of stuff that you start finding. So these are metal things. This is each bucket that hangs on the side. So there's 2 types of buckets. One that you put this dirt into and you carry them back and forth. But there's another bucket that hangs on the side of each shaker. And when you find something, you put it in that bucket. And the first thing that goes in that bucket is a little card here that tells you the date, the quadrant that you're digging, and how deep you are. And this is the kind of stuff that we would find. So sometimes you find agriculture stuff like barbed wire. And sometimes you find stuff like, oh, this is a little metal chink that goes around a 50 caliber bullet. And so you get a combination of aircraft wreckage and agricultural debris. So you bring it all to Ella, and she lays it all out and is looking for stuff that might be helpful evidence. Something that would help confirm the identity of the plane that we're looking for. Preferably something with a serial number on it. Anything that might have come off a human. Clothing, any personal items, equipment, and of course, human remains, most likely bone after these many years. But again, Shaheen would get the bone first. So this is chatting with this kind of stuff that you'd be able to see how Ella and Finn are looking at this life science investigation table. Now we're going to start week 2, continued perfect weather. We're way ahead of the schedule. We start shifting into the woods. And digging in the woods was a different ball of wax for me because you have roots. And it's much harder to dig. And you just can't use a spade, and you can't use that fancy excavator. So everything that we looked for in the woods was all done by hand. And it's not pleasant garden spading. It's like, so a lot of axe and lopping work. Since this is the 4th of July, although we worked on the 4th of July, the folks at the hotel, this is one of the co-owners, also threw us a 4th of July celebration. So they had grill out for us. And you do want to be in Belgium on the 4th of July. Food's excellent. This is Shaheen documenting a find. And because it's a forensic photograph, she's going to be using a fancy camera, not my iPhone, which is what I used to take this picture. And she's got these scale bars in here. This is what it looks like. This is David digging in the woods, and it's slow, tough going. And I'm a botanist by training, and you got to learn all kinds of things about mosses and lichens and roots. And it's amazing how roots look like human bones after a while. This is what the shaker tables look like in the woods. You could, you could bolt them or screw them right to the trees, which had its advantage, but you can also see how steep this is. Walking down that and coming back up, it's like walking down a step. That's how steep it is. And when you're carrying stuff, it's like, ugh. So time to be careful. This is back up on the flat part. And so he's putting some stuff back after finding things. And then this was a big deal because this is a 50 caliber bullet, the butt end of the bullet. And it is in a machine gun that had the last 6 inches of the breech knocked off. So this was a big deal for us because, whoa, we have a machine gun. That means we're going to very carefully dig it out. That means we're going to document it. This is the deepest hole that I think we dug. They did get to dig this with the excavator. And then they took it out and we tried to find the serial numbers, but we couldn't, in this case, read any serial numbers off it. So now we're in week 3. We had a VIP visitor that I'll talk about. We had, at the end of week 3, we'd gone through 360 cubic meters of soil. So how much is that? That's a meter high, a meter wide, and 360 meters that way. I don't know. I would guess a cubic meter of water weighs, I don't know. It might be a metric ton, a cubic, but I don't know that. Ella documented 11,000 pieces of aircraft wreckage. She had done likewise in 2019. So there were 22,000 pieces of aircraft wreckage found and assessed. Sometimes you go and you toss it. And then all the other more valuable physical evidence was logged and photographed and sent to DPAA for analysis, including some possible osseous material. So we'll have to wait and see. Then the excavator came and backfilled the holes. You had to return the equipment to the Bicon. And this is finished. Pictures from the last couple of days finishing up.
Who decided how deep to go?
The archaeologists. How deep do you go? What's in their decision?
About 4 feet deep.
No, not in this case, because there's the shale was so high, so close to the ground. And so what the idea is we'd go down half a foot, a foot and a half, and Teo and others would come in with a metal detector, and you'd go until you get to the sterile level. And the sterile level is where the metal detector isn't finding anything. So the whole idea is you don't want to waste your time and drain the morale of people by needlessly digging. So trying to figure out where the high priority places are, making a plan for that, adjusting based on what you find or don't find is a big part of what the archaeologists do. So that grunts like me go, they know what they're doing. We're working here because this is the place in their judgment is most likely to have this kind of stuff that we're looking for.
So that do you also put seed or other restoration?
Do we put seed back? I think that's part of what the landowner does afterwards. So they get it nice and smooth and everything. That's part of what the excavator does. But I don't think we do any specific planting of seed. We didn't this time. I don't know if somebody came the following days and did that. But you saw how it looked after 2 summers of not being dug up. Yes. So that's another thing that Chuck has to do is find and identify the landowner. Sometimes it's the person that lives there, sometimes it's not. You have to deal with any renters who live on the land but are not the owners, to get a good relationship with the local government and the federal government. In this case, it's going to be the local government and federal government of Belgium. So those are all things that take a lot of diligence and intelligence on Chuck's part. And that's a great thing about having a collaboration with the DPAA, is that those folks live in Europe nearly year round That's part of their professional expertise, is to have good relationships with their counterparts in the host country. So you might, go ahead, David.
Did Belgium contribute anything, is this all US fund?
It's all US funds. The Belgians commit the,
The heavy equipment and things like that?
well, we hire them to do that. So it's contract, but they agreed to this. In other words, they say, yes, here are the permits. This is what you need to do. I don't know if they charge anything for the permits, but they're very collegial, collaborative folks. Want to underscore that. We had many visits from the owners, the families. Again, they're, I'll say appreciative and possibly more. So this is Tom Barrett, former mayor of Milwaukee, UW Madison alum, and currently U.S. ambassador to Luxembourg, which is a several minute drive away from where we were, but he heard about this and wanted to come and see what we were doing. And so he and his staff came for a visit, and we got to show him what he was doing. And he was also quite clear that it doesn't take many days to be in Luxembourg or in Belgium, and you will get an idea of how appreciative people are for what the Allies did in the fall of 1944 and spring of 45. So these are part of the 11,000 pieces of the aircraft, including all these 50 caliber bullets, lots of stuff. And this all went into a dumpster. And we had to take down all the wood, leave it for the farmer, owner. And now, as with the first 3 recovery missions, we wait to see if any of the possible osseous material actually was bone. Was it human bone? And if it was human bone, will it match the DNA from any family members of the person that we think we were looking for?
How long were you enslaved?
Year. So the Fazekas digs were 2016 and 2017. I think we got the good news in 2018, and he was, the remains were buried in 2019. Walter Stone, I think, was 2017, and the star was on there. I still think it's about a year and a half. It is not lickety split real fast because they have to do other analysis.
Because of your meticulous record keeping, we know where to go back to get more, get the entire remains, or the one piece of bone that's been DNA identified in the.
Well, I don't think you plan on going back, especially after 2 years. So Fazekas was 2 years. This was 2 years. It's another one of those judgment calls. It's like there are so many hundreds of sites that you could be digging. You have to think about the opportunity cost and lost. You spend a 3rd year there opposed to another place that might be higher likelihood of success. So, and then again, it's a little bit different than classical archaeology, where you're trying to very carefully go down and reconstruct the layers. This, we're using an excavator. We're trying to go through large amounts of material. I don't think the idea is that you have to find everything, because you don't know how much is going to be there, especially after 78 years. I think the idea is to find enough. And enough may be something that you can hold in your hands. Yes.
Who did the DNA analysis?
So the DPAA will have their labs do the DNA analysis, the physical, the biological evidence, the physical evidence is turned over first to the Belgians, who then turn it over to the Americans, who turn it over to the DPAA. So there's a chain of custody that is already established. So there's a protocol and people respect the protocol and follow it, and it's not tedious. It's just something that you do so you have a chain of custody.
Yeah, we're talking about taking, say, 2 years to get the DNA results back. If people were really motivated, could that timeline be compressed by using, more manpower, maybe more expensive lab techniques, whatever, or is that?
I think that would be a good thing to know, what the capacity is at DPAA and their labs, how fastidious they are in their forensic analysis of the DNA. They have very small amounts. They have to be really careful. So good question for which I don't have a splendid answer as to what the workflow is and what we could do to speed it up. But it's more than just access to a DNA machine.
This is Jordan from Middleton. Can you take a question?
Yeah, Jordan from Middleton.
Yeah, thank you. I have a more general question, and that is when you were finished your day's work and you sat around the evening and maybe drinking some wine and beer, did the group ever discuss what was going on in late 1944 and 1945 in this area? And the reason I bring it up is you said that one of your colleagues was in the 101 Airborne in Afghanistan, and it was the 101st Airborne that was chronicled in the Spielberg Hanks HBO series Band of Brothers, and that's all about exactly where you were, first in France, and then in Belgium, and exactly the times that where you were searching, in late, in the winter of 44 and the January and February of 45. So I'm just wondering if you guys discussed the history. I mean, you must have, right?
Yes, and furthermore, right across the street from the hotel the country road that we were staying at is a memorial to a Belgian who was killed by the Germans during the counterattack.
Okay.
And so we were never more than 100 yards from a memorial. I rented a bicycle from the hotel and biked around, and there's an entire trail, historic trail that I stumbled on. I didn't know about it, but it's very well done, showing which units came through which areas at what dates. So yes, on our days off, we went to Bastogne to go to the 3 major museums there, including the Museum for the 101st Airborne. We visited the American Military Museum in Luxembourg. We visited the American Military Cemetery. American Military Cemetery in Luxembourg, the American Military Cemetery in the Ardennes. So especially since we had so many veterans, they were very tuned to this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
How did they find out the original DNA structure? We didn't know much about DNA until 1960. I don't imagine we have samples of those people's DNA.
So you have the DNA that you find. You guys all remember the king in the car park? The Richard III? Okay. So how did they do Richard III and that's what, the Battle of Flodden Field or something in 1483 or something, and so they've got these guys' bones. What do they need to do to confirm that the bones are actually a horse, my kingdom for a horse guy? So they had to know the king's genealogy and go down and find somebody who's alive today with a known genealogy back to the king. Go find that person and ask that person, would you please give us some of your DNA? And whether there's the maternal line, which you get your mitochondria only from your mom, and she got hers only from her mom, and this goes all the way back. And if you're a male, you get your Y chromosome only from your dad. So you have those two approaches depending on what you have for living relatives. So it does mean that if they find DNA and they get it, they're going to have to find and inform somebody from the MIA's family and ask them for samples, tissue samples, cheek samples, or blood samples, so that they can run the comparison DNA. So that's what's powerful about the DNA technology, but you still have to have, as you're pointing out, a known standard, a known source of DNA.
Is there a database for family members that are looking for missing? And that's when they donated their DNA, but there was no match.
Is there a database for families of MIA so they could donate and build that up? I don't know, and not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so all these other commercial outfits like 23andMe and all this stuff, there's a lot of data that might possibly be mineable, because once you give it to them, you don't have any expectation of privacy anymore. So, and since this isn't a criminal thing, I don't know what the roles of that will be. It's a very good question.
I would think the military would probably, I mean, if they're still trying to identify this harassment, that family members that have donated their DNA.
Yes.
On the match yet would still be on file. You know, I mean, they would still have that data.
I think I will ask Chuck your question and find out what the status is. It's a really good idea. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Does somebody know what we have on the agenda next week?
Yeah, Jaime Cordova is going to be speaking on his work on understanding how oxygen is used by bacteria. And this has to do with his astrobiology work and how do you go about thinking about how do you find bacteria on other planets, especially if so that's what the astrobiology stuff is cool about.
So hopefully you'll all be back next week and you bring a friend if you can.
Thank you.
You have a training to do before you went over there, John? It sure was like 30 about work.
I'm in excellent physical shape.
2 weeks in France was better knowledge before you went.
Well, so, you know, the bucket's no way to swim, but you know, you're bending over, you're thinking, and then you do this, and you do it. How many minutes are there in 50 minutes? And it takes 2 or 3 minutes. If you're doing 12, 15 bucks a time. So it's kind of like when I go from here, it's not arduous, but it's a lot of repetitive work. And so I never got sore, but I also thought these muscles here were in better shape. And then this muscle here,
Years ago, I took a World War II tour
yes,
of that whole area, and then I agree that people are very appreciative even yet. Thank you, Americans, for what you did for us. And the cemeteries are incredible. You can't find it. Go later, go ahead. Perhaps it's out of place.
that's maintained by
Yeah.
Even, nice to you, everything's a lot. Perfect. Well, that was- You know you had one. Oh, that's one. Yeah. Thanks, Tom, that was pretty proud.
Thank you.
Do they need volunteers?
Um,
I'll start with
there, well, I forgot to mention, but, Andrew got a Canadian archaeologist, got an award, he's gonna have his own dig next year, about 90 kilometers west of Paris.